What happens to your photos after you die? It's really not fun to think about, but there are things every photographer should do before it's too late. I'm going to give you my thoughts on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions right here on Adorama TV. Today's question comes from Jason R., and he wants to know, this is such a morbid question, but what happens with all of a photographer's work after they pass away? Is someone generally named to maintain the archives, such as a family member? Would any of the photographer's work see light of day again, or just lay dormant in the cloud and on physical backup drives? Thanks. Well, thank you, Jason, for sending that in. Yeah, it's a bit of a morbid question, but it's also a really important one that many photographers never think about. I mean, life is great and all, but the reality is none of us are getting out alive. So I'm glad that you asked the question. Today I'm going to talk about the legal and practical ramifications, and then I'm going to tell you specifically how I've handled my own affairs. But first, I do have to say up front, you probably know this, I am not a lawyer, and nothing I say here can be taken as legal advice. Laws around this stuff vary by country, and even state by state here in the US. Now I'm going to talk about what I believe to be generally true under US law, but please check with an attorney in your own area if you want to make sure you've got this covered properly. All right, the first thing is, how important is this really? Well, the answer is going to be different for everyone. Some photographers' work has real ongoing commercial value after their death. Fine art photographers, some photojournalists, well-known commercial shooters, and really anyone who's actively licensing their work, selling through stock agencies or photo galleries. If that's you, it's pretty smart to plan so that your legacy lives on. And I'm going to go through everything I know about protecting your images so that your beneficiaries can continue to benefit from your body of work. But what about everyone else? Maybe you're a hobbyist and you just take pictures for the love of it. Or even if you do some types of professional photography, like corporate events, headshots, or even weddings, those images don't generally have as much value after the initial work is done. So you have to decide how much effort you want to put into protecting those photos. But just because there's probably not as much future monetary value in the work, that doesn't mean your images aren't important and valuable. When I was growing up, my family occasionally had photos taken professionally for big events. Like most people, we received a few finished prints from each of those sessions. Decades later, after that photographer passed away, my family received a couple bags of original negatives from those portrait sessions, including outtakes I had never seen before. And these were medium format negatives, beautifully shot, of family members who are no longer with us. Now, I'm a professional photographer, so maybe I appreciated having the negatives more than most people would. But any family would treasure having access to images like that. That photographer had no way of knowing what those negatives would mean to us all this time later. But the simple act of passing them along made a real difference. And it's a good reminder that even the most ordinary photography session can become something precious over time. So whether you think your photos have any future value or not, you still might want to have a plan in place to protect your work after you're gone. So let's talk about what actually happens legally when a photographer dies. And there are two different parts that make up your images. There are physical items like prints, books, or even hard drives that contain your digital files. And then there's the copyright to those images. Copyright is the right that allows someone to license the use of the images however they want, or to prevent the use of those images if they so choose. Under US copyright law, you own the copyright to your photos the second that you push down the shutter button. And there are some huge benefits to registering that copyright, but I think that's a topic for another video. But even if you don't register, unless you sign your rights away, the copyright to your photographs are protected for your entire life plus 70 years. This is one of the many reasons I encourage photographers to hold on to their copyright whenever you can. Your images are an asset that can continue generating income for 70 years after you're gone. But that could benefit your family for 2 generations. The moment you sign away your copyright to a client, that value disappears, not just for you, but for whoever comes after you. So when you're gone, your copyright doesn't disappear. It passes to whoever inherits your estate. And by the way, don't be afraid of words like estate and heirs. You don't have to be a multimillionaire to have an estate. It just means all of your property. And your heirs are whoever you designate to get your stuff. Now, your copyrights are part of your estate, just like your house, your camera gear, or your bank account. If you don't have a legal plan in place, both the physical images and the copyright could be in legal jeopardy. Therefore, you want to have a will or a trust. And again, it's not that complicated to do, even though it sounds fancy, but you should get some help from an estate planning lawyer to make sure it gets done right. Have you ever heard the story about Vivian Maier? She was an amateur street photographer who spent decades quietly creating extraordinary images, mostly in the Chicago area, while she was working as a nanny. She made over 150,000 negatives, most of which she never even developed. Now, in 2007, unable to pay her bills, her storage locker was sold at auction. A guy named John Maloof bought a box of her negatives for a few $100s. When he went through them, he realized they were actually really good, and he eventually co-directed an Oscar-nominated documentary about her called Finding Vivian Maier. She died in 2009 without any known heirs. Now, even though Maloof legally owned the physical negatives, he didn't own the copyright. Under US law, owning a physical photograph doesn't give you the right to reproduce, exhibit, or sell that image. Now, since Maier died without a will, genealogists had to track down a distant cousin in France who had no idea she even existed. They had years of legal battles after that before they finally came to a confidential settlement. Now, if Vivian Maier had simply written a will and left some basic instructions about her archive, none of that chaos would have happened. If you care about your legacy and want to prevent your family and friends from fighting over your work after you're gone, a will or a trust is mandatory. It allows you to direct who gets what. If you don't do that, your state's laws and a judge who doesn't know you is going to decide for you, and whoever ends up managing your images might not know the first thing about photography or what to do with a hard drive full of raw files. In your will, you can specify where all your images are and how to access them, so it's easy for your heirs to find the more important photos. You can even put protections on how your work can or can't be used. Adam Yauch of the Beastie Boys famously included a provision in his will prohibiting his work from being used in advertising. You have that same power over your photographs. If you don't want your images licensed for certain types of clients or used in ways that you wouldn't approve of, you can actually write that into your estate documents. As for the maintenance of those images, that's also up to you. You can appoint a photographic executor. Now, it's not a formal legal designation in most states, but the idea is to name someone in writing who has the knowledge and trust to manage your archive on behalf of your estate. Ideally, it's another photographer, but it could be someone in the industry who understands what your work is, what it's worth, and how to handle it. Now, that person doesn't have to also be designated as the copyright holder. You could have the proceeds go to your heirs, but designate someone else as the photographic executor. They might be responsible for organizing the archive, licensing the images, donating work to institutions, or just advising your family. You just want somebody who gets it. Now, for archives of significant cultural or historic value, there's also the option of donating to universities, museums, charities, or photographic organizations. That said, institutions can be kind of selective, but if your work represents something historically significant, it's worth looking into. Now, if you sell images through stock agencies or licensing platforms like Getty or Shutterstock, those accounts need to be specifically addressed in your estate plan. There might still be money coming in, and if no one knows about that or can't access them, that income is simply going to stop. Your estate planning documents should name those accounts explicitly, and your photographic executor or beneficiary should know how to transfer or access them. Now, legal ownership is one thing, but actually being able to do something useful with your archive is another. Whether you have an executor or not, there are some things you should do to make it easier for other people to deal with your archive after you've gone. One thing you should do is cull down your images to your best or most important work. Even if your heir legally inherits your copyright, what are they supposed to do with thousands or millions of image files? 100 extraordinary photographs are worth far more than 10,000 mediocre ones to your heirs and your legacy. And then, if those files are a disorganized mess with names like DSCN 2018, nobody's going to know what they're looking at, let alone how to find anything valuable. Having an organizational structure, a logical file naming formula, and embedded metadata with caption information is going to make their lives so much easier. You should also think about privacy. Not everything in your archive may have been meant for other people to see. You might have a bunch of outtakes or personal work or just things you shot for yourself and never showed anyone. Think about whether you want all of that accessible after you're gone, and if not, make that clear in your instructions. Now, all of this is worth addressing now while you're still here to do it. Hey, quick sidebar. If you've got a photography question you want me to answer, you probably know what to do by now. Just go to askdavidbergman.com and submit it right there on the site. If you want to keep up with everything I'm doing, thedavidbergman.com has links to my social media, my free email list, a ton of educational videos like this one, and a few discount and affiliate links. And if you're enjoying this video, please hit like, subscribe to Adorama's YouTube channel, and go ahead and tap that bell icon for notifications. It really helps us keep making free photography content for you every single week. Okay, here's something else we're thinking about. Hard drives, even well-maintained ones, typically last somewhere between 5 and 10 years. It's not a matter of if they will fail, but when. There are some things you can do to help, like using a NAS or a network-attached storage device to lessen the risk of a single failed drive. And I've done a video about moving your data to a NAS and how I use it, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. You can watch that later, but you still need backups, and I seriously doubt any of today's storage will be readable by people in 30, 50, or 100 years from now. So you should migrate to new devices as they become available. Whatever you do, the location of your files and instructions on keeping them safe should be mentioned in your will. If you're gone and no one knows how to do that and how to find them, those drives are going to eventually fail and the files are going to be gone with them. And now today we have a lot of files in the cloud. Whether it's just storage or we're talking about your social media accounts or your website, you've got to think about what you want to happen with those accounts and who can access them. And who's going to keep paying for the subscriptions? If those stop, years of work might go away forever. There's actually a law in most US states called the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. It gives your heirs a legal pathway to get into your online accounts after you die. Most of the big companies provide tools you can sign up for to designate access to someone, and if you've set one of those up, it actually takes priority even over your will. The fallback, if you haven't done either of those things, is just their terms of service. But like everything else I've talked about today, it's better to be proactive than leaving your heirs scrambling to figure it out later. There's also an argument to be made for having prints of your best work too. A high-quality archival inkjet print on the right paper can last hundreds of years with no maintenance required. No subscriptions, no hardware, no file formats to worry about, just a photograph. It's probably not a bad idea to do that as well. Some photographers also invest in printing photo books. Those could just be a curated selection of your best work or an annual yearbook of highlights. There's something about a physical book on a shelf that communicates value in a way that a hard drive never will. It tells whoever comes after you, this thing matters and it's worth keeping. The most important thing about all of this is not only to designate someone to handle your archive, but make sure you talk to them about it while you're alive. Don't just name them in a document and assume they're going to figure it out. Sit them down and explain what you're leaving them, what it might be worth, and what you want done with it. That conversation will make an enormous difference. Okay, so let me tell you what I've actually done for my own archive. I've been a professional photographer for 35 years, and I'm still producing new work every single week. I'm proud of my archive and hope that my legacy will live on long after I'm gone, which hopefully won't happen for a very long time. But either way, it's never too early to prepare. A few years ago, I worked with an estate planning attorney to set up a revocable living trust that covers all of my assets, and my photographic archive is explicitly part of that. Yes, there's a one-time cost involved in doing that, but it costs a lot less than the legal battles your family will face without one. His advice was that a trust is often better for this kind of thing because unlike a will, it doesn't go through probate court. That means that my heirs can access and manage my assets much more quickly and privately. My primary beneficiary is not a photographer, so alongside my trust documents, I have a simple one-page instruction sheet that covers my various assets. One of those notes names a close photographer friend who can step in to help manage or advise on my archive when that time comes. Like I said before, this isn't a formal legal designation, but it's a clear written instruction that's pretty easy to follow. So to recap, here are some of the most important things you should do to give your work the best chance to survive long after you're gone. First, talk to an estate planning attorney and make a will or a trust. This video, consider it your motivation to stop putting it off. Yes, it costs some money, but it's absolutely worth doing. Include your photographic archive and copyright explicitly in those documents. Don't assume it's covered because it's just part of your stuff. Be specific. Think about who should manage that archive. Name someone in writing who understands photography and what you've created. Document where everything is: physical drives, cloud accounts, subscription services, stock libraries, licensing agreements, all of it. Even your passwords. stored securely, of course. Your heirs can't do anything with your archive if they can't find or access it. Plan then for ongoing costs. If your archive lives in the cloud, someone needs to keep paying for that. Make sure that's accounted for. Refresh your physical drives regularly. Don't assume a hard drive from 5 years ago is still reliable. Copy your files to new media every few years and make sure someone in your life knows that needs to keep happening. Make prints of your most important work, not just for display, but for preservation. A quality archival print will outlast any hard drive or cloud subscription. And then do some work on your archive. Separate your best images, rename files logically, organize your folders, embed keywords and metadata, and determine if anything should remain private. The easier you make it for someone else to understand, the more likely your work is going to live on. Then address your online presence. Decide what happens to your website and social media accounts, and make sure someone has the access and instructions to carry out your wishes. And then have the conversation with the people who are going to inherit your work. Tell them what it is, what it might be worth, and what you want done with it. So Jason, I think I've answered the first parts of your question about what happens to your archive and who would manage it after you die. As to whether your work sees the light of day again, that completely depends on the plan you leave behind. Without one, the honest answer is that it probably just sits on a drive somewhere until it fails or disappears from the cloud when no one's paying attention. But with a little planning and communication, your work can absolutely live on, be seen, be licensed, and continue to have value for decades after you're gone. None of this is fun to think about, but Vivian Maier is a reminder that even extraordinary work can get tied up in years of legal chaos when you don't plan ahead. You've spent a career building your legacy, now take some time to protect it. What do you all think? Have you thought about what happens to your archive after you're gone? Have you done any estate planning that specifically covers your photography? I'd love to hear how you're handling it down in the comments. If there's any lawyers here, I want to hear what you have to say as well. And while you're clicking around, check out the video above where I talk about how I name and organize my images using photo mechanics so they're easier to identify later. Thanks so much for watching Adorama TV. I'll see you next time right here on Ask David Bergman.